Hi, my name is Eric Kimberling, and I'm the CEO and founder of Third Stage Consulting Group, which is an independent digital transformation and ERP consulting firm. And one of the things we commonly see in our mid market clients that are asking us for help evaluating their ERP options or different enterprise technologies is they ask us to help them evaluate Microsoft Dynamics 365 versus NetSuite. And this is something we commonly see in that mid market. And when I say mid market, I mean organizations that range anywhere from 50 million in annual revenue US dollars all the way on up to closer to a billion in annual revenue. And both products, Microsoft and NetSuite, tend to play really well in that mid market, partly because the two systems are scalable enough to meet the needs of companies that are in the hundreds of millions in annual revenue, but they're also flexible enough to meet the needs of organizations that require a little more flexibility to support their entrepreneurial, higher growth nature in general. So that's the commonality between the two systems. But when we look at other criteria and how we compare the products, they couldn't be much different. And I'll give you a few examples here. One is flexibility. So when we talk about the flexibility of the software, they're almost on two sides of a spectrum, which again isn't good or bad. There are pros and cons to either side of the spectrum. But on one side of the spectrum, you have NetSuite, which is a software as a service, multi-tenant solution, meaning that lots of organizations use the software, but every organization that uses the software is using the exact same version of that software, albeit with different databases to house their customer and master data and different configurations of the software. But you're not seeing a lot of customization of that software. In fact, you're not seeing really any customization of the software. You're using the software the way it was built. You're using the software the way NetSuite intends for you to use it. And that can be a good thing, or it can be a bad thing, or it can be a bit of both. But it certainly limits the amount of flexibility you have in terms of doing heavy customization or personalizing the software to the degree you may want to or need to meet your business process needs. So that's one side of the spectrum is NetSuite, which has a fairly inflexible way of adapting to business processes. On the other side of the spectrum, you have Microsoft Dynamics, which is not a software as a service solution, meaning that you can have your own instance of the software, although it's hosted in the cloud, typically with D365. But it does give you the flexibility to make changes that you may not otherwise be able to make with other SaaS solutions like NetSuite. So that affords you a certain amount of flexibility. In Microsoft also, just as a company, especially in the enterprise software space, really treats their software as kind of open architecture, flexibility. They make it easy to change the software, which can be a good thing or it can be a bad thing. So we see a lot of companies that get too bogged down in that flexibility and they get too caught up in it. And just because you can change the software doesn't mean you should. So that flexibility comes with a dark side or a price to pay as well. So two sides of a spectrum here. You've got NetSuite that is great if you want to standardize and you have common business processes and you're okay kind of fitting into the software. NetSuite can be a great enabler of that. On the other side of the spectrum, you have Microsoft Dynamics, which is much more flexible and open, which can be good if you really need that flexibility, but it can also be somewhat of a distraction if there's that much flexibility available, if that makes sense. So that's the first thing is flexibility. Second thing is scalability. Scalability is a pretty nebulous term that has a lot of different meanings, and everyone can define scalability a little bit different. So I guess in terms of where Microsoft fits versus Dynamics, or I'm sorry, Microsoft versus NetSuite fits, is dependent on how you define scalability. If by scalability you mean number of transactions and ability to handle large volumes, both products are pretty comparable. I mean, I haven't run into a situation yet where either NetSuite or Microsoft Dynamics was overly burdened or couldn't keep up with the transactional volume of an organization. But if by flexibility you mean, or if by scalability you mean standard business processes, repeatable high volume processes, generally that's going to favor NetSuite in that it drives a certain amount of commonality to your business processes because of that lack of flexibility that I mentioned a second ago. If by scalability you mean the ability to be nimble, adjust to customer needs, and maintain your flexibility, if that's what you mean by scalability, then Microsoft Dynamics might be a better fit because it gives you that ability to stay flexible, to be nimble, to respond to customer needs. If you have different divisions, they service different customers, have different product lines. You can adjust and accommodate the software a little bit more easily in those situations than you might with NetSuite. So depending on how you define scalability, that's how those two products compare there. The third area where they differ is in maturity of the product. NetSuite has the advantage of having been one of the first software as a service products, and they've been a software as a service cloud solution for much longer than it was cool to be a cloud solution. They were back in the 90s offering software as a service before people really understood what it was or saw the value, and certainly before it was a big buzzword like it is now. So the product has been built on that software as a service cloud architecture for a couple decades now, whereas Microsoft D365 is less mature because it's just now migrating the functionality from Great Plains, Navision, Exapta, some of the legacy Microsoft products, over to D365. So the maturity isn't quite there yet. What you may be expecting from what you saw in a Great Plains or Navision in years past, you may or may not see that same functionality in D365. And in fact, it's very unclear to a lot of players in the space what exact functionality is or is not included with D365. So the maturity of the products are very different, and it's important to understand what you're getting when you get either product in terms of maturity. And then the fourth and final area that we often differentiate between the two products at a high level is in the general ecosystem. And what we mean by ecosystem is who are the partners out there selling the software, who are the value added resellers, and what's the quality and caliber of our options out there. On the Microsoft side, you have a very fragmented ecosystem with a ton of VARs and partners out there, a ton of people out there selling the software and supporting the software. That's what's fueled the growth of Microsoft Dynamics, is the fact that they have this army of firms out there constantly promoting the products, and that's fueled that growth for the company. But along with that has come some inconsistency and a lack of control over the ecosystem, or the channel, if you will. So you really have to do your due diligence when trying to find that right partner to help you implement Microsoft Dynamics, because they're not all created equally. Some are better, in some cases a lot better than others, and some shouldn't be out there selling the software. So there's quite a spectrum there. So the good news is you have a lot of options. The bad news is you have a lot of options, and there's some not so good options in there. NetSuite, on the other hand, isn't nearly as fragmented, but the options are a lot more limited. And NetSuite, up until recently, was providing most of their own implementation support or implementation project management. And most of that was done, and still is done, remotely via phone calls and video conferences, which can be an efficient way in the short term to implement software and to get the support you need, but it can be highly ineffective if you're a larger organization with more hands-on needs. So that NetSuite direct model that they've used in the past, we've seen a lot of companies really struggle with that, not just in terms of not getting the support they need, but just the cultural mismatch that comes with not having that face-to-face contact and that in-person understanding of your business can be very challenging. Now, there are VARs out there now and partners that are starting to sell and provide support for NetSuite, but not nearly to the degree that you see over on the Microsoft side. So I would say the Microsoft channel is much more mature and established, lots of options, but lots of noise and subpar players in there. NetSuite, on the other hand, is not nearly as mature and established in their ecosystem, a partner channel, and that leaves a lot to be desired in terms of implementation support. So we see a lot of need to augment what the VARs and partners can and can't do. When our clients are going to implement the product, we end up taking on a role broader than what we normally take with another client, just because the NetSuite resources aren't able to play those more strategic roles. So those are the four major areas where the products differ. At the end of the day, I don't have a favorite. I don't think one product is better than the other, but if I know a client situation and what they're trying to accomplish with their digital transformation, chances are I can probably lean one way or the other for that particular client. And usually it comes back to those four high-level criteria that I just mentioned. And in addition to that, obviously, we get into more detailed functional needs and requirements and understanding how the software could or couldn't support that. But if you're looking for a general direction and kind of where you think you might fall or where you might want to be spending more of your time looking, these are the four criteria we recommend. And we help clients do this every day for a living. We help them evaluate Microsoft Dynamics as well as NetSuite and a host of other solutions. We're completely technology agnostic and independent and unaffiliated with both vendors as well as any other vendor out there. So we're able to help through the process. So feel free to reach out if you want to bounce ideas around on how to select between these two systems or others as well. I'll be happy to help you out. So I'll include my contact information down below in the description field of this video. So feel free to reach out, and hope you find this video helpful and have a great day. Thanks very much. Take care.